Disrupting Japan, Episode 28.
Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for coming out tonight. Man, you guys are awesome. Okay, those of you at home or wherever you might be out in podcast land have noticed we've got something special for you tonight. We are recording live from Super Deluxe in Roppongi with some of the most innovative, creative people on the face of the planet, which is the Tokyo startup community. All right, and before we get rolling with the podcast proper, I want to thank our media sponsor, Gaijin Pod, who helped a lot with the coordination in so many other little ways I can't even begin to count. And to give a special shout out to Akihabara News, who helped us get the word out and who's doing the video and running around taking all kinds of pictures tonight. So a big thanks to everyone who helped out on this, as well as you guys. So, it's not a proper one-year anniversary or a proper podcast without a kanpai. So please, get your drinks ready. And 1周年記念日にありがとうございます。乾杯。Tokyo Ale, good stuff. All right, now, I'm going to introduce the panel here. I'd let them introduce themselves, but two of them are far too modest to tell what they're really doing, and one wouldn't shut up about it. And you know who you are. So, to my left is Matt Romaine, co-founder and CEO of Gengo, Japan's, no, actually probably the world's largest and the leading software as a service-based translation company. Next is Hiroshi Asada of BeatRobo, an incredibly cool and innovative Internet of Things company, which, how am I going to explain this? It basically, content delivery based on mobile, okay, for mobile accessories. And you've worked with everyone from Lawson's Convenience Store to Lincoln Park. And rounding out the panel with a VC perspective is Hiro Maeda, who has been on the founding team of two of the most innovative incubators here in Japan, both digital garages, Open Network Labs, and the Beanos Inception program. And now you're onto bigger and better and more in control of your own fun things.
We'll find out soon.
Yeah, all right. So let's give a big hand to the panel. Okay, guys. Now, one of the things, and we've all talked about this before, one of the biggest trends we've seen in Japan within the startup community is the amount of foreign Japanese mixed teams, both in engineering and in management. And I want to get your thoughts. And Matt, let's start with you, because I know this is something very dear to you. I want to get your thoughts. Is this just a trend? Is this something that's actually a competitive advantage? What do you think of it?
So first I want to say thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Tim for that introduction. I think it was great, and congratulations, of course, on your first year anniversary.
Thanks so much.
So yeah, diverse, multicultural teams. I think it's going to be around for a while. I think it is a competitive advantage, and I think I don't know how long it's going to last, but for right now, there are some areas where international and multicultural environments can definitely be harness their competitive advantage from everything from recruiting to access to capital. And
can you think of anything that's like a specific time where a problem was solved, or it took you in a direction that you might not have otherwise if you'd had a standard American team in San Francisco or a typical Japanese team here in Japan?
So at least for the first one, so our engineering team is very international. We have, let's see, 12 engineers or so representing at least 7 different nationalities. And there was a period where we wanted to give the engineers a space to sort of be more creative outside the office. And so a lot of engineering teams do things like hackathons, for example. And so we mixed the hackathon concept with a bit of a Japanese flavor and actually did it over at a Zen temple down in Kamakura. Yeah, and we did it overnight in futon beds.
Oh, cool.
And so, and the food, of course, was fantastic. And the next morning, a bunch of the engineers had to wake up around, 4:30 or 5 to do a little zazen and infuse a bit with the Japanese culture and then continue hacking. So.
Oh, excellent. Hiroshi, I know one of the things you talked about was the difficulty in the very first foreign hire.
Yes. So we haven't hired as much, foreigners. I don't know. I don't want to say that, but
I know.
Gaikokujin.
We know what you mean.
So because we started it as 3 Japanese founders, so 3 co-founders. They were all Japanese. They did not speak English. I mean, I was the only English speaker, but we still wanted to go global. You see, this is still Japanese as well. But the mindset was to think that you are the same as any Silicon Valley company. It's thinking in the global way from the beginning. And to make that happen and to think about that long-term thing, we needed to have a international aspect. So we started speaking in English when we were all Japanese people.
Really, before you
yeah, and then it's like
really?
It's like Rockton. It's oh, can I speak in Japanese? It's important. Exactly. So sorry,
Okay.
Rockton people, I didn't mean it. So but we found out that not the Japanese team were not scared of English after all. It was just having the moment to use it, to find the moment to actually use it. And the first guy to join our company actually made that happen. So every meeting turned into English. Our today's task reports turned into English. Everybody started to read English blogs. So things actually changed from the first guy.
So was the transition smooth, or were people being driven absolutely crazy for the first couple weeks?
No, it's a startup, so they're we'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta love that about startups. Hiro, you're involved with so many different companies, and you've got a much more kind of top-down impression on this. Is multicultural team something that you look at as an investor as a positive, a negative, or is it something that just is incidental to you?
So first of all, I think diversity is great, and having different cultures getting together and different ethnicities getting together to do stuff together is great, and it's great for the country. It's necessary for the country. But for startups, to be honest, diversity is not so great. The reason why is because when you're a startup with 2 or 3 girls or guys, you have a need for speed, right? The only thing that's your competitive advantage is how fast you can execute things and how fast you can make decisions, right? And so because of that, unless the one of the co-founders or all the co-founders have very international backgrounds where they've been immersed into very different cultures while they were young, it usually causes friction. If a very domestic guy and a very let's say American guy gets together to start a company, it usually causes friction. Usually it goes to a very intermediary solution and those kind of things. And you don't want that. You want honesty. You want openness. You want quick decisions, right? And so for startups, to be honest, I don't think it's a great thing to have a very diverse startup team.
That does make sense. So you're saying that if you've got a team that is very similar, they're going to gel together faster as a team. They're going to execute better because they're more likely to think along the same way.
Yeah, so you want complementary skills, right? So you obviously the skill sets should be complementary, the thought process should be complementary, but you don't want friction in the communication because of the different cultures, something that has nothing to do with the business, right? And so Yeah, so
Interesting.
I am pro diversity for the country, but anti diversity for startups.
Okay. Is that something that factors directly into your or others investors' decision making, or is that kind of an incidental?
It's
data
usually
point?
just incidental, right? Because I know a lot of great startups that are successful with very diverse teams, but you have to be kind of like Matt, who has a very international background. I mean, you came from ASIJ, right? And so very international background, and so only people like them, you know, or I forgot what your background is, but like only people like you
Japan.
guys.
It's
okay.
pretty crazy,
New
quite
York,
frankly.
right?
It's-
Until 13, I
We
lived
lived in New York until 13. So I think each
Yeah,
of us have
yeah.
developed a sense of empathy, right? And we can
Yeah.
understand and read that friction and can work around it. So that is important for sure.
Okay. Let's talk about fundraising, because that's something that everybody asks me. In fact, people tend to ask me way before they should about how to raise funding. Japan in the last 5 or 6 years have sort of been overrun by incubators and angel investors, and in America it's even more crazy. So here I really want your input on what companies should be looking at incubators, what companies should be looking at angels, which companies should be bootstrapping. Where should someone start with this, particularly with the accelerators?
So you should start with whoever will give you money. To be very, very honest, because
So you were like a prostitute in a former life.
well, you are a prostitute when you get started. When you get started, right? You get all the help you want. No, but like obviously because you know, especially traditional VCs, they're not built to take risks. Like
Right.
it's they're more like a model of looking for the next significant company. So they have and they would deploy as much capital as they can into that company. So they actually have the luxury to wait, right? But on the other hand, accelerators is a very good model because the models is based on taking risks. So usually accelerators invest in cohorts. So like Y Combinator has 100 cohorts, 100 companies in a single cohort right now.
Right.
And I bet like KDDI's accelerator and Open Network Lab accelerator, they have usually 10 companies per cohort. So they usually, when they think about investing, they think about in batches, right? But traditional VCs, we think about in individual companies. So it's very hard for us us to take risks. But accelerators is built so that we can take risks. And so accelerator is good if you're looking for, basically if traditional VCs won't give you money, accelerator is good.
Wait, let
Yeah.
me drill down on that,
Yeah.
because I think there's an interesting pattern forming here. There's two questions there. I mean, you're talking about first go to the VCs and kind of work your way down to good accelerators, then to bad accelerators. But if you've got an accelerator that's got 100 companies in a single cohort, do you think there can really add value to a founding team?
Probably not. So probably not. Like because the value is more in kind of the network or their interaction with the other companies that are in the same cohort, or maybe the group of companies that are part of that accelerator, right? Or maybe even the networks, right? So Matt's a mentor for Open Network Lab, and so you know having that access to like mentors or other startups who's been there, done that, could be valuable, right? But it's really up to the startup on how they leverage that. So if you're very, I guess, passive on taking advantage of accelerators, then you're not going to take advantage of accelerators at all. You're just going to take like 50 grand and that's it, right? But if you're so I know a lot of great founders who really leverage the hell out of us, right? And that's very good, right?
Right.
They ask for every intro, ask for every connection, and try to ask every question. So if you're very proactive on that, I think accelerators are good.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, everyone is saying that startups are the new MBA. And it sounds a lot like the MBA, where you don't really learn anything of value from your instructors, but the networking opportunities and what you can learn from your peers are phenomenal. And at least in the accelerators, they're giving you money.
Yeah, but with the MBA, they're giving you a degree, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly. And you're giving them an awful lot of money. Well, Hiroshi, I mean, you went through the Movida accelerator. How did that affect your company? Did it accelerate it? Did you?
I actually cheated on it.
See, it is like an MBA.
So there was like the first batch, and you usually apply, do whatever, right? Like you like hand in all these ideas and documents and stuff, but we never did it.
You just showed up, or
Yes, that's what that
showed
that's
up and
what
claimed the
yeah.
desk.
So we're like, okay, we're getting investment from this company, like this VC, who's really strict in numbers. So we need another side that supports us on passion.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, Taizo-san, you never worked in a company, and you live to your 40s and you're still like happy. I want somebody like you. Like, can we do something together? And that's how things started. So.
Okay, so was your experience similar or different from what Hiro was saying? Did you get most of the advantage from working with Taizo-san and the other mentors, or was it more of a networking opportunity for you?
The issue was I was like the second batch ever.
All right.
So there were still no like networks or like people who the senpai people. So we needed to be one. So I actually did. Like 2 years later, I was like the speaker there. So like, I feel like I got more because I was closer to the actual people, like being very close to Dave McClure in the beginnings, right?
Right.
So that's what I was able to meet Taizo-san before he sold Gung Ho. I mean, before Puzzle and Dragons got really big. So like, that part I got benefit, but for the accelerator part, not yet.
Okay. Now, Matt, you didn't go through an accelerator. I'm not sure if you've got anything to throw in on this, or if...
Well, so we didn't go through an accelerator. We received investment from Dave right before he was setting up his. And I guess one of the key things that really helped us was having a cheerleader. And Dave was definitely our cheerleader, and someone who's introduced us to the whole space, introduced us to additional investors. And so in some capacity, that sort of mentorship we got just directly from him as he was forming his incubator.
Okay. So it was more of a traditional investor company relationship than an incubator program.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question I want to throw out, and this is really open-ended. It's one that used to annoy me, but people just won't stop asking, and I've come around to realize that it's actually a pretty good question. And so everyone is asking what the main difference is, what the important difference is between the startup ecosystem and the community here in Tokyo and with the very successful startup ecosystems like San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And we could make a list that's almost infinite, but I want to ping you guys and see what you think is the most important, what one could learn from the other, or mistakes that one or the other could avoid. Hiro, you want to take a shot at that one?
Ooh, there's a lot of differences, right? There's a crap load of it. But I think taking it back a little bit more about investing side. So I think essentially what's causing the difference is competition, right? So just to put things into scale, like the amount of venture capital spending this year is going to be $70 billion, but amount of venture capital in the U.S. And if that was in Japan, it was crazy. But if in Japan, it's about like 1.1 billion, right? And so there's like a nearly 70x difference for two countries where the GDP is only like 4x or 5x different, right?
Right.
And so competition is the ultimate driver of the differences, I believe. And so because of that, there is no urgency with, especially the investing side. There's no urgency in Japan because there's no competition, so we don't have to work hard to basically.
When you're talking about competition, are you talking about competition among the investors for deal flow, or are you talking about competition among the different startups for the investing money?
Both. So
both.
So when there's no competition between the investor for deal flow, that means there's no urgency to make decisions. There's no urgency to be different or to add value, basically. So you can be a non-value add investor and still be able to get good deal flow, right? If you're in Japan. Don't quote me on that. And then, and also in the startup side, if there's no competition amongst each other or even for either building businesses or getting investor money, then there is no this urgency to try to grow or this urgency to try to become better faster, right? And so it's both sides that's kind of driving I think the difference of the ecosystem.
Now, this is one of the biggest differences I've noticed between San Francisco and Tokyo, or even San Francisco and, say, New York, is the speed at which investors in San Francisco will make a decision. So do you think that is cultural, or is that just a result of the dynamics you're talking about now, the competition among them?
Oh, definitely competition, right? Because I make a decision whenever I invest in a U.S. company within 48 hours. But when I invest in a Japanese company, I can wait for weeks, and I actually do that. Right?
Yeah, this doesn't. I've long thought investors will take
Right?
as much time until someone finally forces them over the cliff.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So competition drives a lot of our thought process on how fast we actually do stuff, right? And it's the truth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so different funds are organized differently and structured differently. And in Hero's case, obviously, you can be a sole decision maker. There's a lot of corporate venture capital funds out there where you need to have this process after process of getting approvals before a company can actually be invested in. And so initially, I thought it was more cultural, but having thought about it a bit more, I think definitely the competition is a huge driver, because there's definitely cases of corporate venture capital that's been deployed, within weeks. If the decision makers realize that if they can't get in, then they're going to lose the opportunity.
Here in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about your most recent round?
I was thinking of some other rounds, but
Okay. Hiroshi, I know you don't spend a whole lot of time in San Francisco, but you think about it an
I don't
awful
even
lot.
have a visa, so I need to be a tourist to go to San Francisco. It's true.
Okay.
So I actually don't know the San Francisco culture, but I think there's an advantage to do something in Japan, meaning about the population, and about Tokyo. Suica will probably take years or even more to work in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But in Japan, it just worked in a year or two, and now everybody's using it. So if you are thinking of doing any service like that, I think it's better to do it in Japan. I mean, Tokyo.
Right.
For now. But yeah, about the startup culture, that's the only thing I could say for now, because I don't know.
I think that
I only know it in blogs.
Well, this is one of the things. It's similar to kind of my opinion on it, because my take on it is that it's fine to look at the differences, but the last thing Tokyo or Japan should be trying to do is make itself like Silicon Valley. That was a one-time in history event that just kind of happened, and they couldn't do it again if they had to. And I firmly believe that Japan is going to kind of find their own way, through this, and it'll be different, but it'll be, each year is better than the one before. Now, the question, like I said, I get tired of getting asked that. And the question that I wish people would ask me, but nobody ever does, so I'm going to ask these three guys, is the real secret to creating a steady stream of innovative startups is having a dynamic and supportive community, which we definitely are seeing the seeds of right in this room. It's great to see you guys. But what I want to ask you guys is, what can we do as individuals in the community now, as investors, as founders, to improve the startup community here in Japan? And if someone wants to get more involved, what should they be doing? Matt?
Well, so compared to 5-6 years ago when we first launched, I think there was maybe one incubator that I remember that existed at that time. Now it seems like there's over 20 or so, and there's a lot of events going on now. You've got the weekend hackathon, startup weekend events, innovation weekend. You've got Hacker News Network, Hacker News meetups and stuff going on. And then you have these incubators themselves are now, the companies are now setting up incubators and then doing their events there as well. And so participating in that is definitely a key part of it.
So just sign up for whatever looks interesting and keep trying until you fit in.
If you want to get involved, yeah. I mean, you got to start by understanding the participants and who's involved.
Cool. Hiroshi?
I think what's important is to like be able to find who's similar with you. Meaning, for example, I always look for a person who's never worked in a company because I have not.
Right.
I started my own company when I was 22. I was in graduate school, and I'm 32 now, and I've never worked in a company. I've been CEO my whole life. So,
How hard is it in Tokyo to find people who've never worked for a proper company?
well, go to Accelerator and like maybe you'll find a 22-year-old saying, "I want to do my own startup," and I can actually believe him because I'm still living, right?
Right.
And
You're not dead yet.
I think it's the other way around too. Like the point is to find somebody that's similar to how you want to live. So who I respect today is Taizo-san. He started Yahoo Japan in his 20 whatevers, and he's still never worked in a company probably. And I also like Sanada-san from K-Lab.
Right.
He started his company. He had his company go public twice, right? And that he's also never worked in a company. He's been a CEO his whole life. So that's who I respect. If I see on any 20-year-old somebody, I would believe this guy would never work in a company and still be successful. But usually if you meet the wrong person, they'll be like, oh, you should work for 3 years, understand how you feel being hired, understand bad management, and then you can hire somebody. No.
That's usually the advice I give. Yeah.
Actually, I would say that sounds exactly what Hiro was recommending earlier about seeking out people who are similar to you, and that'll make your life a whole lot easier. Hiro, what are your thoughts on it?
So I actually have a theory that I haven't validated yet, but I'd like to share. So I think a lot of the internet or the internet entrepreneurship ecosystem in Silicon Valley was driven by scientists, right? And so, some scientists found the internet. They thought it would be interesting to, have TCP/IP be connected everywhere else and communicate with each other. And then, there's a company like Silicon Graphics, and then the guys from Silicon Graphics built Netscape, and then the guys from Netscape, built PayPal, and those kind of things, right? So it was very driven by kind of scientists, right? And scientists kind of have this. So I was a computer scientist when I was in college, and we have a very collaborative kind of DNA, right? And so we're all about collaborating for the greater good, so that things get better, so that like open source came from a lot of from the scientists, right? And so we're very collaborative, and they like to pay it forward a lot, right? And my theory is that the Japanese internet ecosystem or the Japanese internet entrepreneurship is actually driven by businessmen, right? So some guy found out there's this thing called the internet in Silicon Valley, and they decided, oh, this could be something good to distribute ads or something, and so let's build a website. And so that kind of driven the internet entrepreneurship ecosystem in Japan, and so it's very business-ish or whatever the stance is. So it's very secretive, non-collaborative. It's all about having arbitrary knowledge and those kind of things. So in order to kind of have not similar but a stronger ecosystem in Japan, I think everyone just has to pay it forward a little, right? And so or be more collaborative. So I think anyone who has some good knowledge to share should spend some time to pay it forward. And what I do, actually, I have these open office hours that anyone can apply on my blog. And I spend about 2.5 hours per week with just nobody, who's just getting started. And But unfortunately, I can only accept 20% of the applicants, right? So, and I usually pick the ones that I feel like I can help most, right? And so, if everyone does that, gives out 2.5 hours of their time to help someone else, then I feel like it's going to become all in all a better ecosystem. So, I think people should just pay it forward.
All right. It's fantastic. Well, listen, I've got just a couple more questions here, but one, I want to ask each of you, what is the best or the most important advice you could give someone who is just starting a company right now here in Tokyo? What would you give them? Hiroshi, why don't you start this off?
Okay. It's about not quitting. You never lose until you stop or quit. So if you believe in something, just keep on doing it, and people, if you're honest enough, people will like you and you'll be happy.
But what if you run out of money?
We'll work at a conveni. Whatever.
All right.
If you want to do something, working at a conveni is nothing. Like, if you want to be a good, famous band, those guys actually work at a conveni, right?
Yeah,
most
of them do.
It's, like somebody said, like a startup is like a rock band, right? Like, everybody knows the famous rock bands, but there are like a million other rock bands that's never famous. But they invest everything, but you need to believe that you could be that famous rock band, right?
Yeah, that's
or
fantastic
else it will never
advice.
happen. So
Awesome.
don't quit.
Excellent.
I'm still not successful. Right?
I think you're doing pretty
like
good.
this guy's famous. This guy's famous.
You're doing pretty well.
I'll try to join this group someday. Be equal. Oh,
So he was obviously one of the two that was too humble to.
Okay, so don't quit. That's my advice. I should say.
Matt?
So there's the cliche, doing a startup is kind of a marathon, and acknowledging that. And I'm not massively athletic, but if you're familiar with running and interval training, you know that if you want to extend the distance that you can run, you do interval training where you run very quickly for short bursts and sort of push your limit. So thinking of a startup that way, recognizing that you're going to have cycles and good days and bad days, and that's why it's also called a roller coaster. And just acknowledging that, and tomorrow's just going to be another day to fight strong, and so to make it through. But the other one that I think is pretty key that maybe I don't hear as much is finding a cheerleader, finding someone who is not working with you on like a co-founder or on a daily basis, but finding someone who can be more of a mentor and just be a sanity check, because there's going to be some tough times.
Okay, fantastic. Hiro?
So it's very similar to the two advice, but keep your burn rate low, right? Your personal burn rate low, and it's actually quite liberating when you find out that you don't need that much money to live, right?
Yeah.
It's very liberating, right? And so you don't need that apartment in Nishi Azabu, right? You just live in I don't know, somewhere like Gotanda or something. Not to diss Gotanda, but they have really nice cheap apartments in that area.
So you're still single?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So no, but hey, but I mean, you can keep burn rates low even if you're married, right? It's just a little bit higher burn rate, but you can still keep your burn rates low, right? And you just got to convince your wife, not to spend too much money. Oh, not happy.
Yeah.
I made some
That
wife
was
mad.
someone who was clearly married.
I think that was from my future wife. But no, it's very liberating, right? And so once you find out that you have very low personal burn rate and that you won't die, and then it's quite you can do anything, right? And the great thing about Japan is you can get really good food really cheaply, right? And
That is true.
and it's healthy too, and if you go to Singapore or even US, everything's greased up and everything. So yeah,
You stay healthy on a budget.
Yeah, stay healthy on a budget. Keep your personal brain rate low so that you can do the marathon and not give up on your dreams. Yeah.
All right. There you go. Well, listen, I've got one last question before we open it up for Q&A. There's a mic stand over there, so anyone that wants to ask a question can queue up. But I'm going to ask you guys to kind of polish off your crystal balls here, and tell us what you think Japan and particularly the Japanese startup ecosystem is going to look like 5 to 10 years from now. Matt, why don't you take a stab at it?
Well, I don't know what it's going to be like, but I know what I kind of hope for. It ties in a little bit with what Hiro was saying earlier about paying it forward. I do hope that the successes, as they come out amongst you guys as well over the next 5 to 10 years, start to feed the capital back in, and continue to support the ecosystem. And I think that's one of the big drivers in the Bay Area that we kind of miss right now. A lot of the it's more anecdotal, but I think there have been a couple of very successful exits in Japan, and the individuals end up moving to the Bay Area because they want to challenge themselves over there as opposed to giving back to Japan. So.
Okay. Hiroshi?
Yeah, like I feel like all three of us are gonna say like the same thing. So that's. I was trying to say something different, but I couldn't come up with one. Yeah. So 10 years, I wish to be an angel investor.
All right.
Meaning I'm still doing my own business, and then I'm still an investor. I don't want to be an investor only thing yet. Yeah. Which means to support the community, to understand, or to be the person to understand the new guy who wants to be like us, like not.
So
like
do you
us 10
think
years later.
that so a lot of us here on stage and in the audience are deeply involved in the startup community already, but it isn't mainstream right now. Do you see it becoming more mainstream? Where parents would not completely freak out if their new grad child says, I want to start a company?
Well, so when we become parents, at least I can understand if I have a kid, right? So I think that things will change. People will understand more technology, right? We know that babies can play with the iPad, right?
Yeah.
Like 3-year-olds can like launch and like play a game and do everything by themselves.
Okay.
Like,
Excellent.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. Hiro, what do you think it's going to look like?
What is it going to look like?
We're going to have more competition for deal flow here?
So, I mean, no, it's going to grow. It's definitely going to grow. But like I said, competition is the driver for more growth, right? And so I think it's going to be a quite modest growth for the next 5-10 years, to be very honest. And so I think it will be almost a miracle if we were able to 3x our venture capital spending in 5 years.
Okay.
Okay, if we can. But I hope that happens, right? But I think it will grow. It'll grow modestly, right? It'll grow modestly.
Well, 3x in 5 years is pretty quick growth by normal standards.
By normal standards, yeah. So that's why it's called a miracle, right?
Yeah.
So I think I think what's going to happen is there's going to be more and more of these kind of people like Matt, people like Hiroshi who has this exposure to many different cultures, kind of like transferring their like perspectives to other entrepreneurs, which would create this like chain reaction of people who wants to pay it forward, people who understand what's going on, and so I think as a whole we'll become a little bit more advanced, or the bottom up will go much higher, a decade down the road, yeah.
So it sounds like you're seeing a lot of the current trends continuing in a very steady and orderly manner. A very Japanese approach to startup growth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Japanese.
Well, listen, I want to let's give our three panelists a huge hand, because I think you guys are great. And I'd like to open it up to questions for anyone who has anything at all to ask to any of us. Can you actually just hand him a mic if you...
All right. You spoke about how scientists drove innovation in the Bay Area.
I haven't validated that yet.
You haven't validated it, but I think there's
Thanks.
there's some realism to that statement. And Japanese research is a very well-known and strong industry driven by great schools. But most often we see small companies that get started out of the best research labs in Japan get swallowed up by the Mitsubishis and Zaibatsu of this country. So how can we encourage great companies in the robotics industry, in the genetics industry to arise from those schools and become the next big company of Japan?
So I'm not the probably right person to answer this question. Like I think a lot of it has to do with with how IP is protected with whatever is developed into research institutions. So like I think a lot of the ownership goes to the universities, which is very hard, which gets locked up in institutions like that, or whoever sponsors the research. And so I think in order to have these ideas break out of these labs is to figure out how the IP transfer works, or make it more liberal, or like how Stanford did it with Google, right? And so they just took some equity from the company, and that equity is worth like billions of dollars. But I don't know what. So that was the status like a couple years ago when I heard back. I don't know what their status is right now. I know there's some initiatives that are trying to change that, and so I'm hoping that it has evolved. Yeah.
I'll throw a comment on top of that. I agree that sorting out the IP licensing that the universities do is a huge priority. But another thing that's going to really help is that a lot of Japanese companies now are looking to global markets, where it's not just shopping an idea to 3 potential buyers, all of who have no incentive to jump on an idea quickly. If you go to the global market, it puts pressure on these domestic companies to act faster and to take risks on new technology as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting speech. I know that, progress is slow and you have to take time and it evolves and it's like a whole about creating ecosystem and everything. But if you had to do something right now to really spike the startup ecosystem, what would be that one thing that you would do?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So if I have the magic wand and can do anything I want to do.
Well, not magic wand, like
no magic wand.
Like if this was like your goal, like you have 6 months from now to really spike up the startup ecosystem, what can you do?
Other than bribing politicians.
Yes.
Matt? So I think what needs to really happen is some initiatives that would attract more and more talent and more money into this country, right? And so, if I can't bribe a politician, I don't know what I could do. But but I think Singapore is a very wonderful kind of case, right? Because they had all these like tax incentives. They attracted a lot of talent and a lot of basically PE funds and hedge funds to basically set up base in Singapore. They also even subsidize a lot of the whenever you hire someone locally, right, and those kind of things. So they made it extremely attractive for a lot of foreign companies to come into Singapore and set up shop there. And I think Japan should do the same.
But do you not think that there's enough capital already in Japan?
There's enough capital, but there's not enough capital that's unlocked, right? There's a lot of capital that's sitting in these large corporations, right? And we're sitting on like trillions of dollars, right? And so, it's hard. There's a lot of factors why this is happening. It's just because that's how larger corporations kind of function right now. They just basically try to generate a lot of profit and just sit on it. And so, rather than just reinvesting into the ecosystem, or they rather put it into, or they should put it into R&D or something. So those things should happen, but those things I don't know. It's pretty hard to do in 6 months to a year, but yeah.
Well, I'll give something for the grassroots. I think one of the most important things that you can do to support the startup ecosystem is to have startups work with each other. This is something that's starting to change, but the more startups try to work with other startups rather than with large corporations as vendors, the more people will get used to this fast-paced, dynamic. Startups give much better feedback than large corporations. So I'd say probably the best thing that could be done quickly is to encourage startups to work with each other as much as possible.
I think if you can influence policy pretty quickly, then that's probably one of the fastest ways. And one might be to incentivize corporations. There's probably also just a hesitant, risk-averse workforce aspect, where if there's a way to create a sense of safety amongst a young, creative workforce, that it's okay for like a year to just go do whatever you want, and at least look for an idea that you want to sort of build upon, and have a safety net. Then I think that might actually inspire a lot more. Ideas to fruit.
I would make a fund that invests $10,000 $10,000 to every startup that's made by a high school student.
Huh.
Like, I'll invest in all of it. And that could probably change something in 6 months.
We would get some interesting startups out of that.
Yeah. At least there'll be like 5 cool ones that's actually better than any 30-year-old
That's true.
startups. So that's what I would
Excellent.
do.
Okay, thanks, guys. Next question. Here we go.
Hi there. I'm Volker Heistermann, Yusham Ventures. I'm from San Francisco in Taiwan. And I think this is a fantastic event. Good energy, great panelists.
Thanks for coming out and joining us.
Yeah, so I travel a lot through different ecosystems. Actually, right now, about 90% of my time. And I keep hearing the question of, like, how can we copy Silicon Valley? And I think it's great that you guys on the panel mentioned you don't want to copy Silicon Valley. So my question is, like in Taiwan, we did a little soul searching a few years ago and said, well, it's a hardware country, right? So let's just do more in hardware. So what is Japan's soul searching? And where are some of these, you mentioned it, you alluded to it, there's a lot of research, a lot of IP. Where does that sit? Where are the startups outside from O2O, from apps, and all the general stuff, the copy stuff? Where's the real, like, nitty-gritty, hardcore research startup, biotech, nanotech? Where are they? And is that a chance for Japan?
That's a deep question. I can jump on that with mine. Do you want? All right. I think that part of it is you can find little niches around, but quite honestly, I think in Japan, I mean, if you look at, and I know we say don't copy Silicon Valley, but in this case, we were talking about the pay it forward mindset. And Silicon Valley has seen maybe 7, 8 generations of successful entrepreneurs funding and mentoring the next generation and iterating on that. Japan right now is really only in its first iteration. Right now we're really seeing the first time where a lot of successful entrepreneurs are investing and mentoring new startups. On the software side, we're really on the first iteration. If you look at what's happening on some of the Internet of Things type companies, there's interesting stuff that there's like the seeds of something very interesting happening there because you've got a lot of people who have worked for 30 years in Sharp or Sony or Panasonic with real-world production, sourcing, QA experience that are leaving to join startups. And so I'm thinking we might see some really interesting stuff coming out of there. But, man, it's too early to tell. Step by step.
Thank you.
You guys want to put something, layer something on top
when
of that?
I think of Japanese ingenuity, I love washlets. I think.
All right, yeah.
So that's a space that I'm very excited in.
I believe in, what do you call it? The powered suit, the robot thing?
Oh, the Cyberdyne?
Yeah, like something like that. Like, I feel like Japan will be really strong in the next 30 years using that because everybody else is going to be old around the world.
All right.
Actually,
Just
so
solve the problem in front of you, right?
I think one area I'm actually quite excited about is virtual reality, right? And the reason why is because we're so Japanese culture. I don't want to generalize, but like we're so into being kind of in a different fantasy world, like that's why we have all these manga and like all these hentais going on, right?
Yeah.
And so like I think once if Oculus Rift or whatever virtual reality platform becomes quite dominant, with like 30,000 units or something distributed or something like that, like I think it's gonna unload a bunch of
Yeah, I think
not a bunch of hentais. Anyways,
yeah. No, that too. I think.
No, it's going to unload a bunch of creativity, right? And so I think we're actually, there'll be a lot of interesting startups. That's why we have a very powerful gaming companies because I don't know what it is. We just like want to kind of be in a different world or something.
Do you remember I was doing Second Life?
Oh yeah. You did it at the wrong time, so.
I did it in 2006.
Yeah, so that was the wrong time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now I see this world about this Oculus Rift and Second Life being together. Second Life is now like PlayStation 2 level. People can make it anytime. That's like the next internet, and I still believe it. It's been going like it's been 10 years, but
yeah. But no, I think there is this thing. I mean, we all, and okay, me more than most perhaps, have a habit of kind of poking fun at the anime and the manga. And some of the stuff that's, let's call it the further out there type of projects. But the fact is that even if 99% of them don't go anywhere, there's going to be 1% that is truly groundbreaking and interesting and innovative, and that makes the rest of it worth it, right?
Thanks so
Excellent.
much.
Okay, I think we got time for maybe two more.
Hey guys, thank you very much for tonight. I'll try to keep my question very simple. My name is Lauren Fikes, and I run a startup called Gucci. The elephant in the room, which is language. I met a lot of Japanese startups that the founders don't speak a lick of English, and then their websites and services go up, and they're all in Japanese. And there's a lot of talk about Japanese startups going global and being international companies, but then at the same time, there's not anything in English on their websites. And vice versa, when it comes to investment from VCs like Hiro. When it comes to like these international teams, you said anti-diversity. So, a guy who's American or Canadian who comes to Japan and wants to change the ecosystem, make it more global international, comes here and finds a Japanese dude that has the same vision as he has, and then it's going to get ignored or looked over by most of the VCs here because there's no way a Japanese VC guy is going to give a non-Japanese guy any money. So, my question to you is that those two factors in play, how does Japan's ecosystem change given that a majority of the founders here are not really acting very global, and then the VCs here aren't really investing in any international people who come here?
Hiro, I know you're dying to dive on this one.
It's tough, right? To be very, very honest, it's really tough because as a startup, you don't have much resources to work with, right? And so you want to do everything you can to speed things up. That's why diversity is not good. But same thing as when you address markets, right? So when you're as a startup, do you want to address a market that's like you're not even close proximity with, And so like you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to address the market that you understand most, where you can speak the language, understand the language, and those kind of things. So strategically, it makes sense for a lot of the Japanese or domestic startups to first start with Japan. And their lack of speaking English is definitely a huge friction of going global, and I think it's going to be tough. Like we need more mass.
Who are some success cases that started out in Japanese and went global? Rakuten?
Yeah. Well, it depends on how you define global, but
well,
yeah.
Well, they're definitely outside of Japan. I mean, okay, we're not going to beat up on Rakuten today.
Is Dentsu global?
What's that?
Is Dentsu global?
I wouldn't say they were a startup, even from their inception.
But the same goes to VCs, right? So as funders, like, okay, some guy from Canada comes here and tries to do something in how much Japanese do you understand, or how much of the culture do you understand? Will you be able to understand the nuances, or what's kawaii, or what's not, and those kind of things, right? And those, especially for consumer technology, those are very important. Even in business development, you're at a disadvantage, right? And so as a VC, like, we have the fiduciary responsibilities of basically maximizing returns. And so if you think of it that way, then we would place a bet. We'd rather place a bet on the guy who understands the market most than the guy who's just coming in. To be honest, it's tough. And I think the driver of the change, so the drivers is going to be always the exception, right? And so when we find that one company, there's going to be a few exceptional companies that's going to be able to, as a Japanese, be a successful entrepreneur in the U.S. I mean, we're seeing that already, right? Or as a U.S. Or as a foreigner being successful in Japan, and we're seeing that in China already, right? And so, like, there's always going to be exceptions, and those exceptions are going to be the drivers, I believe, right? And so I think all we have to do is just keep funding whatever we think are good entrepreneurs or are good, and hopefully one of those become exceptions that would drive these changes, basically. Yeah.
And I will say that one thing, I question one of your assumptions in that my first company here in Japan, Vanguard, back in 1998, I spoke pretty horrible Japanese at the time. I had a mixed team of foreigner and Japanese, and I raised funds, I made sales. So believe me, it can be done. People do it. Japanese VCs are quite willing to fund foreigners here in Japan if they're convinced they can execute.
There's that, and then if they're convinced that they're committed. And I think there's an element of transience that foreigners just sort of have being in Japan. I mean, how committed are they to really slogging it through and getting through the difficult times in Japan? And there's a concern. I can imagine that there's a concern by investors where, okay, when it gets really tough, how do I know that you're not just gonna pack up and go? And they're pretty sure that the Japanese probably won't, because where are they going to go? Right? They're already here in their home country. But if a foreigner tries to raise money and execute in Japan, and if it gets really tough, so there's ways you have to think about how you're going to express and convince the investor that you really are committed. Are you studying Japanese? Are you going out and selling to Japanese customers, even if your Japanese isn't that great? So there's different ways you can express that, and then once you convince them, then I think it gets a bit easier.
Okay, so we got one last question, and we're going to wrap it up for drinks and networking.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Gerald from Cylon Capital, and outstanding panel and questions, and so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I also spent time between Silicon Valley and Tokyo. I had one comment on the difference between Silicon Valley and Tokyo, and I think is the fact that the business cases, I think, in Silicon Valley are much simpler. They are able to articulate the gap in the market much quicker and without a lot of PowerPoint slides following that. And that leads also to an ability to pivot to new markets when the first idea did not work out. And I think that's something we could take as best practice here to be faster.
Why do you think that is? Is it strictly a matter of education? Why do you think it is?
I think it's detrimental to be as thorough as Japanese are.
As thorough?
Yeah. Japanese really love thoroughness and completing things and explaining it in great detail.
I think that's true. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding from the panel here. I think that's dead on. Do you guys have anything to add?
I don't get what the question is, though, sorry.
It was more of a statement.
Okay.
I do have a question, but I haven't gotten to my question.
Oh, you're getting to the question. All right, let's get to the question so we
question
can get to the
was,
drinks.
What do you think about women entrepreneurship in Japan, and what can we do to encourage that?
Great question. Strange segue. Matt, you got thoughts? Who wants to jump on this one?
Just do it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't even know what's wrong about.
Maybe it helps as a Westerner in Japan. It's easier to see, but I do think that entrepreneurship opens up a channel and an opportunity for a lot of women who can bypass a lot of the corporate hierarchies that have been in place. The women that have been on the show have been every bit as tough as their male counterparts. So I think that women are going to be perhaps even overrepresented in Japanese startup founders. Guys, what do you think?
I mean, it reminds me of, I believe there is even an incubator, or at least a workspace that has a playroom for kids and toddlers to help encourage. I forget what it's called, but it's over in
Akasaka Hub? Yes. That's right.
Yeah, Yuzo's place. Yeah, exactly. And so there is an awareness that there's this need, and there's growing facility for it.
So I think part of being an entrepreneur, it requires some stupidness, right? And
So where are you going with this?
Because it's kind of stupid to try to build a rocket, right? Or to send it to Mars, or it's kind of stupid to be let's figure out a way how to remit money through this PDA thing, or it's almost like it requires a little dumbness but curiosity, right? I think women in general, this is a very wrong way to start, but everyone's giving me no, don't go there. No, but women in general are much smarter than men, to be honest. Are much smarter than men.
Nice recovery.
No, right? No. I think there's some study, right? Some women on average have 20% higher IQ than men, right? And it's true, and because you need some stupidity in order to become an entrepreneur, and there are a lot of great COOs who are women. Sheryl Sandberg, Marissa Mayer. They're very great as operators, right? That's why I feel like women as CEOs do much better than COOs do much better as men as CEOs. So I feel like that might be the best way to get them involved into this entrepreneurship movement, is to get them as CEOs, actually. Yeah, I don't know where I was going, but yeah.
But I think do you think we're all going to see more women in entrepreneurship, more women starting companies here in Japan in the years to come?
I think in general, yes, because
Yeah, I hope so. Well, listen, guys, let's give our panel a huge hand. Man, thanks for coming out. And I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. It's a joy to have you here. I'm looking forward to talking with you all over drinks. Thank you so much.